Our next speaker presents a university perspective on promoting interfaith dialogue. I'd like to welcome Professor Medwin Hughes, who is the Vice-Chancellor, University of Wales, Trinity, St David. Could you please extend a welcome to Professor Hughes?
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Can I thank you again for the opportunity of addressing this conference on the focus of world peace. I've been asked to address the subject promoting interfaith dialogue, university perspective. How can universities foster interfaith dialogue? We have had a fascinating discussion over the last hour on so many issues that relate to the creative tensions between the pacification of issues linked to faith and the need to secure a meaningful framework where people can stand in a free context to say who they are and what they believe. And the question that's been asked of me is to focus on a very narrow context of an institutional structure, university, and the role of the university to support faith. Now, universities are by their very nature autonomous institutions in the main that are there to critique, that are there to ask the difficult questions, that are there to allow not the issue of pacification, but the difficult question to be asked and to be tested. Universities stand for integrity of inquiry, the neutrality of context, and they offer the intellectual capital to seek answers to global issues. I pay tribute here to UNESCO for the excellent work that it undertakes with universities to develop research, to develop networks of inquiry, where key issues, as we have heard today, difficult issues, sensitive issues for governments, for organizations to come together to answer, for the benefit of the common good, for the benefit of the citizens of the world, whose culture, whose identity must be respected and must be given an opportunity to be celebrated in every context. What is the role of the university? Let me try and focus perhaps on the context. What is the question and what is the role of the university in supporting interfaith, not interreligious, interfaith dialogue? For faith is based upon a doctrine. It is based upon a spiritual conviction rather than proof. And faith within our community must be respected. The articulation of faith within political, social contexts must be respected. It is a basic human right that I can share with you in peace, in tolerance, who I am and what I believe. We know that interfaith dialogue is not a luxury for the few, but it is a requirement of the many. And the implications are far more than establishing positive relationships between communities. Effective faith dialogue can be transformational. Effective dialogue, the ability to talk with each other, can allow us to change the world. Before I focus upon the relationship of faith and dialogue, let us remind ourselves perhaps of some of the key assumptions that we considered yesterday in our deliberations. We live in a world where no single religion, no culture, no system ideology is the single voice of truth. For anybody to stand here to say that that is not the case does not reflect the true nature of our community or our society. We live in a world where you and I should have the right to be able to stand and say, I believe I believe, but I also understand that you believe. And it is that dialogue of exchange. It is that typology of belonging that makes it possible to secure peace. We live in the world where the secular voice is important, and we need to understand the context of the secular so that we can understand the implications of the pacification of a state and the importance of identity of individuals. We live in a global world where national identities in no way precludes our responsibilities to the humankind, to humanity, and to one earth. And we live in a world where spirituality is not the domain of religion alone. Spirituality offers us the opportunity to have dialogue with the secular and the non-religious voices. Religions, like people, like communities, are forever changing. They are live communities who can fear, who can love, who can hate, live communities who work together to develop a symbiotic relationship so that we can secure peace within a very broken and fragile world. Unless we accept that we have something to learn as well as to teach, interfaith dialogue means nothing. Unless we are prepared to open out, to stand back and observe with humility the traditions, the values of other civilizations, of other faiths, there is no purpose to interfaith dialogue. To be authentic, religious dialogue must arise not from a system related to social or political context of a nation state, but from the belief of the individual, that he or she is prepared to stand and say, I believe, and I believe based upon centuries of tradition of faith, of sacred text, the interpretation of sacred text to my life now within a modern world. Interfaith dialogue is setting that neutral platform where people of traditions can stand together and talk and respect the position, but also be honest in a critique. We need to appreciate that interfaith dialogue is a very emotional engagement that brings together those deep inner feelings of identity and also a social commitment to see my faith being respected within a community along your faith. Interfaith dialogue is not easy. Nobody said it was. But the importance of developing a framework of engagement that allows the individual and the state to identify a common platform where we can answer the difficult questions is extremely important. The one thing I've really enjoyed over the last 2 days is the rigor of the questions. And you know, it's far more difficult to answer the question or to craft the question than sometimes for somebody to answer it. And I leave UNESCO with some very good questions. And those questions will help me to define what interfaith means. Let me suggest that an university context allows us to stand back. Those of us who are involved in universities are there because we think. We are there because we like to challenge. Those of us who did lecture, unfortunately some of us now have had to leave the questions of lecturing. But those that did lecture and those are involved in lecturing realize that interfaith dialogue has 3 shared worlds. The first shared world, I think, is the dialogue of life, where people have a dialogue about their hopes, their aspirations, their daily problems, the questions we heard today. Why can I not, in my day-to-day life, celebrate who I am? And it's a very difficult question to answer, no, you can't. The second area refers to action, the dialogue of action. What are the practical implications where people of faith can come together to live in common harmony? And the third focuses upon the dialogue of theological exchange. I believe. How do we then, within a neutral context, understand my belief versus your belief? Well, what can we take for granted in this dialogue of engagement? Well, the first thing we can say, that there is no interfaith without faith. A meaningful dialogue is only possible when people of deep conviction stand together and say, my faith is important. In dialogue, mutual understanding cannot be strengthened unless both convergence and divergence are held in a creative relationship. Interfaith dialogue is not based on a model of negotiation between parties of faith. It is about mutual empowerment for faith to develop in a proper context. It is about engagement of public concerns, of social justice, of human dignity, of constructive action on behalf of the common good. Universities are there to set the framework where this critique can take place. The question was asked yesterday from the floor. How do universities relate to defining histories? It wasn't history, histories. The histories of people coming together. And it is through dialogue. Dialogue is about talking with, not simply talking about. Effective dialogue must show that there is dignity in difference. If we cannot see the dignity in our difference, then we are wasting our time. The dignity of belief, the dignity of identity is at the heart of any meaningful engagement. And it is that dignity that sets the socio-political context where nation-states should be able to come together to consider what is a prosperous, sustainable future for our communities and for our world. We also know what dialogue does not achieve. We are not here to take away our differences. We are here to note them and to identify the added value of your difference as compared to my difference. And we are not here to seek a common belief. We are here to articulate a framework where beliefs can work together. Interfaith is difficult. The challenge of interfaith dialogue has never been easy. For interfaith dialogue to succeed, all parties must be clear on the conversational goal. People of faith should never feel that they have to water down or compromise their religious identity in order to fit in. I believe that it is our responsibility to negotiate the framework whereby the social narrative, the political narrative, which will be different from country to country, is able to have a dialogue with people of communities of faith that allows for an agreed language where I can say in public, I am who I am. This is my tradition. These are my values. This is what I stand for. The dialogue is not about conversion, and it is, in my humble opinion, perfectly acceptable for those who enter into faith dialogue to claim that they do believe that they have the absolute truth. For I'm sure that so many faiths have identified the commonality of truth that brings us together. I believe that we should stand within that global family as dignified equals, where we do consider the importance of faith. I mentioned yesterday the importance of universality of faith allows for differentiation. And can I quote Michael Warnock when he focuses upon the importance of that neutrality? In a genuine pluralistic society, there is no one sacred canopy. At its spiritual core, there is an empty shrine. That shrine is left empty in the knowledge that no one word, no one image or symbol is worthy of what all seek there. Its emptiness, therefore, represents the transcendence which is approached from a virtually infinite number of directions. Interfaith dialogue allows us to consider unity. Let me consider the traditions that I am comfortable with, the Abrahamic traditions. The roots of the faith we share, the different traditions, focus upon one God, the God of Abraham, who gave us enduring values. And those values have been interpreted in so many different contexts. But it is those roots, those values, that allow us to have the courage to reaffirm who we are and what we believe. It is those values, it is those common inheritance values that shows the love of God and the respect of God for His creation. It is our respect for all God's creatures and for the environment that call us to a single humanity. The great Abrahamic traditions speak of a faith which rests in the heart beyond the limits of our intellectual knowledge. But we can only perceive the true wisdom of faith through the heart, because it is through the heart that we believe. And there is a difference between the religious interpretation and the faith interpretation of what we stand for. I believe in ... The Muslim will say this, the Christian will say this, the Hindu will say this, but I believe, and they can only believe through the heart. Emotion, sacred text, interpretation, social context come together within an effective critique of interfaith dialogue. Have we given enough attention, I wonder, to looking to the timeless traditions of understanding faith and of the common root? I'm very much aware of the verses of the Holy Quran, and we've already heard it this morning, but with your permission, I will read it again. O mankind, we created you from a single pair of a male and a female, and made you into nations and tribes, that ye may know each other, not that ye may despise each other. That's such a powerful statement, that we can see the value of all our humanity and of all of our roles within our faiths. The role of interfaith dialogue and communities in universities is to try to set a framework where we can develop mutual respect. Pacification is fine, but I do feel that within a broken world, where governments are working hard to identify a meta-narrative that bring geopolitical, geosocial difficult issues together, we must be honest with each other and create a language that allows acceptability of cultural social norms. It is so key for political and social reform within our century. Knowledge alone won't answer the questions. It is the wisdom of looking to the traditions which is important. When all can consider the importance of faith, then we have the opportunity to learn from each other. How do we live in this world, while at the same time revealing the richness of our own spirituality? I'd like to offer a quote from His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales, the patron of our university, who has taken such an interest in critique and of developing a language that focuses upon interfaith. Quote, "At this most profound time in our world, it seems to me that the great religions of the world were all aware that human beings belong to something or someone infinitely greater than their individual selves. In Christianity, St. Paul speaks of Christ or the Holy Spirit as within the Christian. Hindus speak in the same way in the sense of Atman, the eternal self, and Islam speaks of God within. It is so important we focus on our inner understanding of faith, because if we do not understand that, we cannot articulate that within a social context. United by common bonds of faith in a sacred dimension beyond ourselves, we can start to establish a framework where we move from the dialogue to active action within communities, within societies, and that does lead to transformational change and social impact. You can't change the world without looking into yourself first and asking, how can I, as a faith believer, offer a critique and engage with others? Respect, love, and the wisdom that true identification of what religion means starts from within. Can I quote one verse from the Venerable Master Ching Kung? Interfaith harmony has been and will remain to be the cornerstone of world peace. How then do we achieve within a university context greater understanding of interfaith harmony? And I would suggest perhaps that these are general questions for general bodies, be those within a social, cultural or political context. It is for others to decide whether they are or not. We need the sincerity and integrity to answer the question. We need the integrity to focus on engagement. We need the equality and parity of esteem to respect difference. And we need a compassion to see the greatness within the others and then take that into our own life and into our own culture. In the tapestry of religious experiences, there is a place for all faiths and for the critique of faiths. The Buddha said, "We are what we think, and all that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make the world." Given that our thoughts define the framework of our beliefs, of our cultural norms, it is those thoughts, it is those social policies that will transform the world. Let us interpret those words of the Buddha within a social context for nation states. The question was asked yesterday 4 times. Is this merely the icing on the cake? Is it merely an opportunity to have a model of engagement? Or does it really make a difference? Can we seek greater cohesion in socio-political context? Can we consider a narrative that embraces not the theoretical abstract models of faith engagement, but in the experience of life-changing situations that foster positive relationships of faith communities? Can we turn the extreme voices of creed into a plural narrative of tolerance? Because that is the challenge of the world. Today, Christians, Muslims, Jews, Hindus, Sikhs stand together to celebrate who they are. And they do that with honor, with integrity, with commitment. But they do that also mindful of the importance of the sanctity of life, of the importance of religious freedom, and of the honor of respecting a being that is far greater than themselves and than their creed. The real clash of the 21st century, ladies and gentlemen, is not between religions, but I would suggest within them. Do we have the opportunity to have a critique where interfaith dialogue can make a difference? We must train a generation of religious leaders who embrace the world in its diversity, and also political, social leaders who can have the confidence to stand up and allow citizens of the world to be who they want to be, not only in private, but in public. My university, the University of Wales, the University of Wales Trinity St David, as some of you will know, is the oldest Royal Chartered University in England and Wales after Oxford and Cambridge. It has at its heart a deep commitment over 170 years of inquiry to faith. We were the first university to create in Wales a Centre for Islamic Studies. And today we are working with Chin Kung, the foundation institution, to develop a new institute. We do that because we believe in the power, the transformational power of creed, that it can change the world, if the condition is right. Can I quote Rabbi Jonathan Sachs as I bring my talk to an end? To be a child of Abraham is to learn to respect the other children of Abraham, even if their way is not ours, their covenant not ours, their understanding of God is different from ours. We know that we are loved. That must be enough. To insist that being loved entails that others be unloved is to fail to understand love itself. And isn't that what interfaith dialogue is about? Effective interfaith dialogue is about letting go, about standing back and allowing us together to build a common narrative. The success of interfaith dialogue depends upon individuals who will continue to challenge, who will continue to ask the difficult questions. And the role of universities is to offer a neutral ground where those answers can be articulated. I believe in a common humanity that can make a difference. In the great governing principles of ancient China, there is an excellent phrase that focuses upon humility. And I'd like to finish with that, because unless our politicians, our leaders have humility in answering questions, we will never find the answers. The reason why the rivers and seas are able to receive the homage and tribes and tributes of the valley streams is that they are lower than all the others. It is thus that they are the kings of them all. There are no kings and queens of faiths. There are parity of faiths. And it is the parity of faith that allows us together, hopefully, to build a new civilization, a new democratic world that puts empathy at the heart of belief and acknowledges us all for what we are and for what we believe. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Hughes. Wales is indeed lucky to have leaders such as yourself in the university sector. Our next presentation will be from Venerable Master Chin Kung, who is just about to rejoin us now after meeting with the French consul. So if you would like to stand up, and you can have a stretch, and then you can welcome the Master in while you're standing up.